The courtroom falls silent as 12-year-old Zara Matthews stands rigid in her formal black blazer. Her small hands tremble slightly, but her eyes burn with quiet determination as she faces her mother's attacker. Picture this moment. A young black girl with courage beyond her years, staring down the man who destroyed her family's sense of safety. The stakes couldn't be higher. The defense attorney smirks as it all. He doesn't believe a word from this child's mouth. Nobody else seemed to believe her either, from the moment they moved into that neighborhood. Suddenly, something shifts in Zara's demeanor. She straightens her spine and makes a subtle gesture, tapping her thumb against her index finger twice. Most wouldn't notice, but someone does. Her German shepherd, Rex, sitting attentively beside the prosecution table, his ears instantly perking up. What happens next will change everything. Let me take you back 3 months earlier. Zara and her mother, Dr. Zara Matthews, had just moved into Cedar Grove Estates, a predominantly white neighborhood with perfectly manicured lawns and suspicious glares. Their beautiful Tudor-style home represented everything Amara had worked for as a successful pediatric surgeon. The neighbors watched them like exhibits in a museum. Mrs. Peterson from across the street asked if they were the new cleaning service. Mr. Wilson questioned whether they were lost while jogging past their house. The HOA suddenly discovered violations on their property that somehow didn't apply to identical situations at other homes. Zara felt their stares at the bus stop, in the school hallways, at the community pool. Her mother told her to hold her head high, that they belonged there just as much as anyone. Then came that rainy January night. Zara still feels the closet walls closing in around her when she thinks about it. The crash of breaking glass. Her mother's startled cry. Rex's body pressed protectively against hers as they huddled in darkness. The man's voice echoed through their home. "Take what you want, just don't hurt us," her mother had pleaded. His response was a sickening thud and her mother's pained groan. When the police finally arrived 40 minutes later, they surveyed the scene with bored expressions. The officer didn't even bother writing down Zara's description of the attacker. "Some of these neighborhoods just aren't ready for integration yet," he'd muttered to his partner. "Maybe consider selling while you can still get a decent price." Her mother's bruised face hardened with dignity. "We're not going anywhere," she declared. It was during therapy sessions afterward that they discovered Rex's special talent. The therapist had been talking through the incident when she mentioned something that contradicted what actually happened. Rex immediately growled, staring directly at her. "Interesting," the therapist noted, testing the reaction several more times. "Your dog seems to have an uncanny ability to detect falsehoods." Now, in this courtroom, with her mother's attacker smirking at the defense table, Zara realizes this unique ability might be their only hope for justice. Because in a system that doesn't want to believe them, Rex might be the only witness who can force the truth into the light. And the truth is far more dangerous than anyone realizes. For days after the attack, Zara and her mother sit in the sterile police station waiting room. Rex presses his warm body against Zara's legs, sensing her anxiety as they prepare for the lineup. The fluorescent lights cast harsh shadows across Detective Mercer's face as he leads them down a hallway. "You understand how lineups work, right?" he asks, barely making eye contact. "Just point if you see the guy. But remember, kid, memory can be tricky under stress." Zara's heart pounds as she enters the small room with the one-way glass. 5 men stand against the wall, numbered cards in their hands. Her eyes immediately fix on number 3 Derek Mills. His posture, his build, the way he holds his head. Rex begins to growl softly beside her. "That's him," she says, pointing with absolute certainty. "Number 3. The detective sighs, rubbing his temples. "You sure about that? You only saw him for what, a second? During a thunderstorm? Through a closet door?" "I'm sure," Zara insists, feeling her voice grow smaller under his doubt. Later, in the detective's office, Zara overhears his conversation with her mother. "Look, Dr. Matthews," he says, lowering his voice, "we picked Mills up on an unrelated B&E, but he's got an alibi for your break-in. His girlfriend says he was with her all night. My daughter identified him," Amara replies firmly. Rex's reaction confirms it. Detective Mercer's laugh is sharp and dismissive. Now you want a dog as a witness? Listen, I'm trying to help you here. The DA's office isn't going to pursue this case with just a kid's testimony against a man with an alibi. 2 weeks later, they sit across from District Attorney Harrison, a stern man with wire-rimmed glasses who speaks without looking up from their file. The evidence is circumstantial at best, he explains. No fingerprints, no stolen property recovered, just your daughter's identification. And what about the threatening note left behind? Amara asks, pushing the plastic evidence bag forward. The one that said, "Get out while you can?" Harrison barely glances at it. Could have been anyone. There's no direct connection to the assault. As they leave the courthouse, shoulders slumped in defeat, a woman's voice calls out behind them. "Dr. Matthews." "Wait." Assistant District Attorney Elena Rodriguez hurries down the courthouse steps. Her dark hair is pulled into a tight bun, her expression determined as she catches up. "I heard about your case," she says, glancing around before continuing. "I'd like to take it." "Why?" Amara asks suspiciously. "Your boss just shut us down." Rodriguez's eyes flash. "Because I've seen this pattern before. And because I believe your daughter. Have you thought about what this means?" Rodriguez warns them later that week in her cramped office. "Mills has friends in the department. His cousin is a sergeant in the precinct that responded to your call." Zara watches her mother's face harden with understanding. That's why they didn't dust for prints, she realizes. Why they took so long to respond. For the next month, they prepare for trial. Rodriguez coaches Zara through mock testimony in their living room while Amara takes notes. "Remember," Rodriguez instructs, "just tell exactly what you saw. No more, no less." But the pressure builds daily. Their mailbox is vandalized. Their car tires slashed. At school, classmates whose parents are on the police force whisper as Zara passes. "Liar. Troublemaker. Why don't you move back where you came from?" One evening, pulling into their driveway, a patrol car cruises by slowly. The officer inside doesn't wave. He just watches, a silent message delivered. That night, Zara finds her mother crying at the kitchen table. "We could still drop this, sell the house," she whispers. "Start over somewhere else." Zara places her hand over her mother's. "We didn't do anything wrong," she says firmly. "We belong here." Throughout it all, Rex remains their steadfast protector. He alerts them to strangers lingering near their property. His presence deters the more overt intimidation. At night, he sleeps at the foot of Zara's bed, chasing away nightmares. During their final preparation session, Rodriguez sighs in frustration. Mills' alibi is solid on paper. His girlfriend won't budge. The physical evidence is minimal. "We need something more." Zara strokes Rex's fur thoughtfully, remembering how he reacted during the lineup, how he tenses whenever they discuss certain details of that night. What if Rex could help us know when someone is lying?" she suggests quietly. Rodriguez looks skeptical until Zara demonstrates. She tells 3 statements, 2 true, 1 false, and Rex immediately reacts to the lie with a subtle but distinct change in posture. The prosecutor's eyes widen. "This is unconventional," she says slowly. "But if Mills takes the stand and lies, have you ever had that moment when you knew a crazy idea might be your only chance?" This was it for Zara. With the trial just days away, she begins training Rex to respond to a signal, a discreet tap of her finger that means, "Listen for lies." Because sometimes when the system is stacked against you, you need to create your own version of justice. The packed courtroom falls silent as 12-year-old Zara Matthews takes the witness stand. The polished wooden panels loom around her like a cage. Her shoulders stiffen beneath her formal black blazer, but her eyes burn with quiet determination as she's sworn in. In the gallery behind her sits her mother, clutching a tissue, knuckles white with tension. Beside the prosecution table waits Rex, Zara's German Shepherd service dog. Ms. Rodriguez had fought hard for his presence, citing Zara's trauma-related anxiety. Judge Hansen, a stern white woman with silver-streaked hair, peers down from her bench with an expression of practiced neutrality. The jury 10 white faces and 2 people of color watch with varying degrees of interest or skepticism. Zara's eyes drift to Derek Mills at the defense table. He sits with perfect posture in a crisp suit that can't quite hide the hardness in his eyes. When he catches her looking, his mouth curves into the barest hint of a smirk. Ms. Matthews, the defense attorney begins, his voice dripping with condescension. You claim my client was at your home on the night of January 15th. How can you be so certain when the police report indicates it was dark and rainy? Zara swallows hard. She's been preparing for this moment for months, but her mouth feels suddenly dry. The courtroom lights seem too bright, too harsh. I saw him clearly when the lightning flashed. She answers, her voice steadier than she feels. And I heard his voice. It has a distinctive sound. Rough, like he smokes a lot. The defense attorney, Mr. Caldwell, paces before the stand, his expensive shoes clicking against the floor. A child's memory during trauma is notoriously unreliable, he states, addressing the jury more than her. And you expect us to believe you recognized a voice you'd never heard before? Objection, badgering the witness, Ms. Rodriguez calls out. Sustained, Judge Hanson replies, but Zara can see the damage is done. Doubt clouds the jurors' faces. Ms. Matthews, Caldwell continues, isn't it possible you simply saw what you expected to see? A threatening figure who confirmed your family's anxieties about moving to Cedar Grove? Zara feels heat rise to her cheeks. What do you mean? He waves his hand dismissively. The neighborhood has certain standards. Some families might feel out of place, perhaps create threats where none exist. Objection. Ms. Rodriguez jumps to her feet. This line of questioning is inappropriate and irrelevant. Approach the bench, both of you, Judge Hanson orders, her expression tightening. As the attorneys argue in hushed tones before the judge, Zara feels the weight of the courtroom's eyes. Mills continues staring at her, that small smile never leaving his face. He thinks he's winning. He thinks no one will believe her. When questioning resumes, Caldwell's attack intensifies. He presents the alibi, Mills' girlfriend swearing he was with her all night. He questions how Zara could have seen anything from inside a closet. He brings up the lack of fingerprints, the delayed police response that compromised evidence collection. With each question, Zara's confidence visibly wavers. The jury is slipping away. One woman has already started checking her watch. Then Caldwell delivers the final blow. Your dog, this Rex, you've claimed he helps with your anxiety, correct? But isn't it true you've been training him to react to certain people? To create a show for this very courtroom? No, that's not true. Zara protests. Your Honor, defense calls for a mistrial. This child has tampered with. Something shifts in Zara in that moment. A memory flashes through her mind, her mother's bruised face, the officer's dismissive glance, Mills' smirk as he walked past her in the hallway earlier, whispering you should have stayed in your place. She straightens her spine and discreetly taps her thumb against her index finger twice, a movement so subtle that only Rex notices. The German shepherd's ears perk up immediately. I know it was him, Zara says with renewed conviction, pointing directly at Mills. The same way Rex knows. Before anyone can object, Rex rises and emits a low, rumbling growl directed precisely at Mills. The dog's hackles rise, his focus unwavering. Your Honor, Caldwell protests. This is absurd. Judge Hanson bangs her gavel. Order. What is happening here? Ms. Rodriguez steps forward. Your Honor, we'd like to introduce new evidence. Rex is a specially trained trauma response dog. He recognizes unique scent patterns associated with Zara's trauma. His reaction to the defendant isn't coincidental. It's scientific. This is ridiculous. Mills suddenly stands, his face contorted with rage. You can't use a dog against me. Sit down, Mr. Mills, Caldwell hisses, grabbing his arm. But it's too late. I never even touched the kid, Mills shouts. I was paid to scare them, not hurt anyone. The courtroom erupts in chaos. The judge pounds her gavel repeatedly, her expression shocked as she realizes what has just transpired. Mills has revealed knowledge only the perpetrator would possess. The fact that he didn't encounter Zara during the break-in. Bailiff, Remove the jury. Judge Hanson orders sharply. As the jurors file out, murmuring in confusion, she leans forward, eyes fixed on Mills. Mr. Mills, you just admitted to being in the Matthews home that night, contradicting your sworn testimony. Mills' face drains of color as he realizes his mistake. That's not. I didn't mean. Who paid you? The judge demands. I want a name right now. Mills looks desperately toward the courtroom doors. I can't. He'll ruin me. From the gallery, a man rises suddenly and attempts to slip out. Bailiff, Judge Hanson calls. Stop that man. As the bailiff intercepts him, Zara gasps. Mr. Wilson, their neighbor, the HOA president who'd been particularly aggressive about maintaining neighborhood standards. The courtroom falls completely silent as Wilson is brought forward. Judge Hanson studies both men with disgust before addressing the bailiffs. Take them both into custody. This court will recess for 1 hour, and when we return, I expect full confessions from both of you. As the men are led away, Judge Hanson turns to Zara, her stern expression softening slightly. Young lady, she says quietly, that was either the bravest or most reckless thing I've ever seen in my courtroom. Zara reaches down to stroke Rex's head, her hand still trembling slightly. Sometimes, Your Honor, she replies, the truth needs a little help being heard. Judge Hanson's gavel strikes with finality 3 weeks later. The courtroom holds its breath as she delivers the sentence. 5 years for Derek Mills on charges of breaking and entering, assault, and intimidation. 7 years for Howard Wilson on conspiracy charges and multiple civil rights violations. The evidence that emerged after their confessions revealed a coordinated effort to drive the Matthews family from the neighborhood, not just one incident, but a calculated campaign. What would you do if no one believed you about something this important? Would you have the courage to stand your ground like young Zara did? The system doesn't always make it easy. Zara watches from the gallery, her mother's arm wrapped protectively around her shoulders, as the two men are led away in handcuffs. Wilson doesn't look at her, but Mills pauses, his eyes meeting hers for a brief moment. There's something different there now. Not remorse exactly, but a grudging respect. Outside the courthouse, reporters thrust microphones toward them. Dr. Matthews, how do you feel about the verdict? Will you stay in Cedar Grove? Is it true your dog helped crack the case? Amara steps forward, her voice steady. We're not going anywhere. Cedar Grove is our home too. As for Rex, she smiles down at the German shepherd sitting attentively beside Zara. He simply did what any good friend would do. He stood by the truth. The Matthews case becomes a catalyst for change in ways no one expected. The local newspaper runs a 3-part series on housing discrimination and bias in law enforcement. Cedar Grove's police department undergoes mandatory training on implicit bias and proper evidence handling. At the neighborhood's summer block party, their first since moving in, neighbors who once averted their eyes now stop to chat. Mrs. Peterson brings over a homemade peach cobbler. It's not instant acceptance, but it's a start. The conversations are sometimes awkward, occasionally tense, but undeniably necessary. For Zara, the transformation runs deeper. The shy girl who once hunched her shoulders against stairs now walks with her head high. When a new black family moves in 3 blocks over, she's the first to welcome them, bringing cookies and neighborhood tips. In school, she joins the debate team, her voice growing stronger with each competition. When the topic of criminal justice reform comes up, her classmates fall silent, eager to hear her perspective. She doesn't shy away from the difficult conversations anymore. Rex becomes something of a local celebrity. Judge Hanson, impressed by his abilities, recommends him for a pilot program working with traumatized witnesses. The courthouse creates a special protocol for trained dogs like him to assist vulnerable witnesses during difficult testimony. Picture this moment 1 year later, at the community center's youth leadership conference. Zara stands at the podium, her voice clear and confident as she addresses the crowded room. Rex sits beside her, gray now touching his muzzle, but his posture still alert and proud. Have you ever had a moment when you had to stand up for the truth, even when it was terrifying? Zara asks the audience. I have, and what I learned is that the truth doesn't always speak for itself. Sometimes it needs our voice, especially when that truth is inconvenient or challenges the status quo. She tells them about that terrible night, about the courtroom, about Rex's uncanny ability to sense deception. But mostly, she talks about finding her courage when it mattered most. Behind her, projected on the wall, is a photo of their home, not as it was after the break-in, but as it is now. Solar panels gleam on the roof. Flowers bloom in carefully tended beds. A sign in their front yard reads, "Hate has no home here. We didn't just win a court case." Zara concludes, her hand resting on Rex's head. "We reclaimed our right to belong." That's what justice really means, not just punishment for wrongdoing, but restoration of what was taken. Your dignity, your safety, your voice. As the audience rises in applause, Amara watches from the side of the stage, tears shimmering in her eyes. The journey has left its scars on both of them, but it's also given them something precious, the knowledge that they are stronger than the forces that tried to break them. Outside the community center, rain has given way to sunshine. Rex pads alongside Zara as they head toward the car, his tail wagging gently. A young girl approaches, shyly asking if she can pet him. Of course, Zara smiles. He's good at keeping secrets, but he's even better at revealing truth. The girl's hand hovers over Rex's fur. Is it true he can tell when people are lying? Zara winks. Truth has a way of coming to light one way or another. The real magic is having the courage to stand by it when it does. And as they drive home through the streets of Cedar Grove, their neighborhood, their rightful place, the setting sun paints the houses in shades of gold. Not perfect, not solved, but better. A community slowly learning that justice, like truth, requires both vigilance and compassion to flourish.